and lost by a whisker. And look what happened to the world with all of the wars and all of the problems. And look what happened with inflation, because inflation's just eating up our country, eating it up. So it's too bad. But there are a lot of things that could happen. We have to get those wars settled. We have to get, I'll tell you, you have to get Ukraine done. That could end up in a third world war. So could the Middle East.
So maybe let's talk about what it takes to negotiate with somebody like Putin or Zelensky. Do you think Putin would be willing to give up any of the regions that are already captured?
I don't know. I can tell you that all of this would have never happened, and it would have been very easy, because you don't have, like, that question wouldn't be asked. That's a tougher question. Once that starts happening, because he has taken over a lot of territory. Now, I guess they're insurgents now too, right? So, it's a little bit interesting that's happening, and that it can happen. And it's interesting that Putin has allowed that to happen. Look, that's one that should have never started. We have to get it stopped. Ukraine is being demolished. They're destroying a great culture that's largely destroyed.
What do you think works better in those kinds of negotiations? Leverage of, let's say, friendship, the carrot or the stick? Friendship, or sort of the threat of using the economic and military power?
So it depends on who the person is. Everyone's different. Negotiation's interesting because it depends on who the person is. And then you have to guess or know through certain knowledge which is, more important, the carrot or the stick. And with some people it's the stick, and with some people it's the carrot. I think the stick probably is generally more successful in that, we're talking about war. But the kind of destruction that we're witnessing now, nobody's ever seen. I mean, it's a terrible thing. And we're witnessing it all over. We're witnessing it in all parts of the world. And a lot of things are going to get started. Look what's going on with China. Look at Japan. They're starting to rearm now. They're starting to rearm because China's getting, taking over certain islands. And there's a lot of danger in the war right now in the world. There's a great possibility of World War III. And we better get this thing done fast, because 5 months with people like her and him, he's checked out. He just goes to the beach and thinks he looks good in a bathing suit, which he doesn't. He's sort of checked out. Hey, look, you can't blame him. That was a coup. They took it over. They took over the presidential deal. The whole presidential thing was taken over in a coup. He had 14 million votes. She had no votes, not one. And nobody thought it was going to be her. Nobody wanted it to be her. She was a joke until 6 weeks ago, when they said we're going to have to, politically, they felt they had to pick her. And if they didn't pick her, they thought there'd be a problem. I don't know if that's right or not. I actually don't think it's right, but, they thought it was right. And now immediately the press comes to their aid.
If we can go back to China on negotiation, how do we avoid war with China in the 21st century?
Well, there are ways now. Here's the problem. If I tell you how, and I'd love to do it, but if I give you a plan, like I have a very exacting plan how to stop Ukraine and Russia, and I have a certain idea, maybe not a plan, but an idea for China, because we're in a lot of trouble. They'll be in a lot of trouble too, but we're in a lot of trouble. But I can't give you those plans, because if I give you those plans, I'm not going to be able to use them. They'll be very unsuccessful. Part of it's surprise, right?
Right.
But they won't be able to help us much.
So you have a plan of what to say to Putin?
Yeah, I know.
Take off.
No, I had a very good relationship with him, and I had a good relationship with Zelensky too, but I had a very good relationship with Putin.
Tough topic, but important. You said lost by a whisker. I'm an independent. I have a lot of friends who are independent, many of whom like your policies, like the fact that you're a deal maker, like the fact that you can end wars, but they are troubled by what happened in the 2020 election and statements about widespread fraud and this kind of stuff, fake electoral scheme. What can you say to those independent voters to help them decide who to vote for?
Right. I think the fraud was on the other side. I think the election was a fraud, and many people felt it was that, and they wanted answers. And when you can't challenge an election, you have to be able to challenge it. Otherwise, it's going to get worse, not better. And there are lots of ways to solve this problem. Go to paper ballots. Do it the easy way. I mean, paper ballots, and you have voter ID, and you have same-day voting, and you have proof of citizenship, which is very important because we have people voting that are not citizens. They just came in, and they're loading up the payrolls. They're loading up everything. They're putting students in schools. They don't speak a word of English, and they're taking the seats of people that are citizens of our country. So, look, we have the worst border in the history of the world. We have coming into our country right now millions and millions of people at levels that nobody's ever seen. I don't believe any country's ever seen it. And they would use sticks and stones not to make it happen, not to let it happen. We don't do anything. And we have a person who was the border czar, who now said she wasn't really the border czar, but she was. She was the border czar, but she was in charge of the border. And we have her, and she's saying very strongly, "Oh, I did such a good job. She was horrible, horrible." The harm she's done. But we have people coming in from other countries all over the world, not just South America, and they're coming in from prisons and jails. They're coming in from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're street criminals. Right off the street they take them, and they're being given to our country. Drug dealers, human traffickers. We're destroying our country. This is a sin what's been allowed to take place over the last 4 years. We're destroying our country, and we'll see how that all works out, but it's not even believable. And now you saw in Aurora, Colorado, a group of very tough young thugs from Venezuela taking over big areas, including buildings. They're taking over buildings. They have their big rifles, but they're taking over buildings. We're not going to let this happen. We're not going to let them destroy our country. And in those countries, crime is way down. They're taking them out of their prisons, which is good because good for them. I do the same thing. By the way, if I ran one of those countries, any country in the world, I would make sure that America has every one of our prisoners. Every one of our criminals would be here. I can't believe they're going so slowly, but some aren't. But they all are doing it. And we can't let that happen. They're emptying out their prisons and their mental institutions into the United States of America. We can't let that happen.
So a lot of people believe that there was some shady stuff that went on with the election, whether it's media bias or big tech, but still the claim of widespread fraud is the thing that bothers people.
Well, I don't focus on the past, I focus on the future. I mean, I talk about how bad the economy is, how bad inflation is, how bad things like, which is important. Afghanistan was, in my opinion, the most embarrassing thing that's ever happened to our country. And because of that, I think Putin went in. When he saw how stupid we were, Putin went in. But it was the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. I really believe that. But, we left 13 dead soldiers. Think of it, 13 dead soldiers. Many soldiers horrifically hurt with arms and legs and everything else gone. We left hostages behind. We left Americans behind. We left military equipment, the likes of which nobody's ever left behind before. Billions and billions of dollars of equipment. They're now selling the equipment. They're one of the largest arms dealers in the world. And very sad, very sad. And we were there for a long time. I was going to get out. We were getting ready to get out. Then we got interrupted by the election. But we would have been out with dignity and strength. We were having very little problem with the Taliban when I was there because they knew it was going to be tough. I dealt with Abdul. Abdul was the leader, and we got along fine. He understood, but they were killing a lot of our people before I came down. And when I got there, I spoke to him. I said, "Can't do it. Don't do it anymore." We went 18 months before this happened. This horrible day happened. We went 18 months and nobody was shot at or killed.
What do you think that was, the carrot or the stick in that case in Afghanistan?
The stick, definitely.
So the
stick.
threat of military force.
That was the stick, yeah. It doesn't have to be, but that was the stick.
Well, let me just linger on the election a little bit more. For this election, it might be a close one. What can we do to avoid the insanity and division of the previous election, whether you win or lose?
Well, I hope it's not a close one. I mean, I don't know how people can vote for somebody that has destroyed our country. The inflation, the bad economy, but to me, in a way, the worst is what they've allowed to happen at our border, where they've allowed millions of people to come in here from places that you don't want to know about. And I can't believe that that's going to be a close election. We're leading in the polls, and it looks close, but I think in the end it's not going to be a close election.
What do you think is the right way to solve the immigration crisis? Is mass deportation one of the solutions you would think about?
Well, you've got to get the criminals out of here fast, right? The people from mental institutions, you got to get them back into their mental institution. No country can afford this. It's just too much money. You look at what's happening in New York and Chicago and LA and lots of places, and you take a look at what's happening. There's no country can afford this. We can't afford it. And we've got to get the bad ones out immediately, and the rest have to be worked on. It's happened before. Dwight Eisenhower was sort of a moderate president, moderate type person, but he hated when he saw people pouring into the country, and they were. Nothing like now. I probably got elected in 2016 because of the border. And I told people what was happening, and they understood it, and I won the election, I think, because of the border. Our border is 25 times worse right now than it was in 2016. I had it fixed too. I had it the last week of the famous chart that I put up was exactly that. The chart. When I looked to the right, I said, "There's the chart." That was not a pleasant experience, but the chart that I put up said, and that was done by Border Patrol, that was the lowest number that we've ever had come into our country in recorded history. And we have to get it back to that again. We will.
Let me ask you about Project 2025. So you've publicly said that you don't have any direct connection to Project
Nothing. I know nothing about it. And they know that too. The Democrats know that. And I purposely haven't read it because I want to say to you, I have no idea what it's all about. It's easier than saying I read it and, all of the things. No, I purposely haven't read it. And I've heard about it. I've heard about things that are in there that I don't like, and there's some things in there that everybody would like, but there are things that I don't like at all, and I think it's unfortunate that they put it out, but it doesn't mean anything because it has nothing to do with me. Project 25 has absolutely nothing to do with me.
You posted recently about marijuana, and that you're okay with it being legalized, but it has to be done safely. Can you explain your policy there?
Well, I just put out a paper, and first of all, medical marijuana has been amazing. It's been, I've had friends and I've had others and doctors telling me that it's been absolutely amazing, the medical marijuana. And we put out a statement that we can live with the marijuana. It's got to be a certain age. Got to be a certain age to buy it. It's got to be done in a very concerted, lawful way. And the way they're doing it in Florida, I think, is going to be actually good. It's going to be very good. But it's got to be done in a good way. It's got to be done in a clean way. You go into some of these places, like in New York, it smells all marijuana. You've got to have a system where there's control. And I think the way they've done it in Florida is very good.
Do you know anything about psychedelics? So I'm not a drug guy, but I recently did ayahuasca, And there's a lot of people that speak to sort of the health benefits and the spiritual benefits of these different psychedelics. I think we would probably have a better world if everybody in Congress took some mushrooms, perhaps. Now I know you stay away from all of that stuff. I know also veterans use it for dealing with PTSD and all that kind of stuff. So it's great, and it's interesting that you're thinking about being more accepting of some of these drugs, which don't just have a recreational purpose, but a medical purpose, a treatment purpose.
So we put out a statement today. We're going to put out another one probably next week, be more specific, although I think it's pretty specific. And we'll see how that all goes. That's a referendum coming up in some states, but it's coming up, and we'll see how it does. I will say it's been very hard to beat it. You take a look at the numbers, it's been very hard to beat it. So I think it'll generally pass, but you want to do it in a safe way.
Speaking of marijuana, let me ask you about my good friend Joe Rogan. So you had a bit of tension with him. So when he said nice things about RFK Jr., I think you've said some not so nice things about Joe. I think that was a bit unfair. And as a fan of Joe, I would love to see you do his podcast.